Good morning. All right, I heard one person reply. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody today. Thank you so much for joining us on this wet Saturday morning. Okay, but hey, we've got warmer weather, right? So I actually did my little walk this morning, got that in without any rain, so I was happy about that. Excited for a great weekend. Spring is here, so yay. You're at Noble. And we see some new faces here. So let me just tell you a little bit about who you are, who you're seeing there, why we're here. Okay. Noble stands for a network of owners, business leaders, and entrepreneurs. And actually, Noble was started here at Oasis Circuit City Church back in 2017. Okay. Pre-pandemic, then we kind of went underground. Now we kind of stopped for a little while for a couple of years. And then in 2020, end of 2021, we got going again. And we're a 501c3 and we're part of the church, but we're also independent of the church. And really our goal is for people to understand what their purpose is on this planet, how to fulfill their purpose. But then our typical audience then are business owners, entrepreneurs, and business leaders. Okay. So we're hoping you're here today to learn more about that, but we've got a great topic and very excited to welcome some regular guest speakers of ours, because usually about every quarter they're here to talk about money. Okay. And traditionally they've been here 4 times before, and they're usually talking about how to handle money properly. Okay. A lot of us are in the hole. I've been in the hole. Okay. I've been in the hole through college and those kind of things. Even post-college, I found myself in the hole with credit card debt and those kinds of things, but have learned how to deal with that, how to pull myself out of it, and how to then start to make money with my money. And that's more of what today's event's about, of going to that next step. All right. But I want you all to understand too, that if those of you that are still kind of in that hole, we want to help you with that. Noble wants to help you. That's part of, before you can be a successful business owner, be a successful business leader, be an entrepreneur, which is even steps further, you got to get that under control.
Hi, we can't hear you. Some of us can't hear you.
Steve does. There he goes. Okay, there we go. Sorry.
You're good now. I think, I think the mic got muted somehow.
You didn't hear the last 5 minutes of my introduction, but welcome to all of you today. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know there's some people, not just from Central Ohio, but there's some folks from Pittsburgh and other places on there this morning. So welcome to all of you. But I also want to announce one of our core events, and something that I've been doing for the last 12 years now, and that's a program called Noble Academy. We used to call it here in Central Ohio Young Entrepreneurs Academy. We have another class for this coming up on April 20th and 21st is the first weekend. It actually goes for 3.5 months, okay? It's about 8 classes, both on-site and virtual, plus some additional support classes that go along with it. But what this does is it helps you with your ideation. It helps you with your purpose, okay? Purpose, ideation for helping you to start a business. It goes through all the mechanics of learning how to start, run a business, and then also helps you to write a business plan, marketing plan, and also you finish up with pitching to real investors. So actually everybody that ends up pitching gets money from investors. Everyone that goes and completes the class gets money from investors to help them launch their business. So our next class is starting in Marysville. First weekend will be at Marysville High School, and then other classes will be in the Marysville area as well. But we have flyers for this. So it's for middle school through adult. Okay, so middle schoolers, 6, 7, 8, clear up through adult can participate in this. And so we're excited about this class coming along. So, hey, Matthew 25. You're familiar with Matthew 25, 14 through 30. Okay. 1 talent, 2 talents, 5 talents. Okay. We're here today to learn how to deal with 2 or 5, not the 1, right? 2 or 5, not the 1. Jeff, come up, lead us in prayer.
And everybody, why don't we stand?
Touch the screen, Jeff.
Let's pray. Father, we just come before you this morning. First of all, we want to just surrender anything that might interfere with us hearing you today. Or whether that is unconfessed sin, or maybe it's just strife with somebody else that we need to make things right with. Lord, we just want to be open and available and ready with hearts to receive what you have for us to receive today. Lord, I pray for Kayla and Josh this morning as they present about how to handle, how to manage, and how to grow money. Lord, we know that your word talks about money more than any other topic, and so we know that this is an important kingdom principle. So we just commit this time into your hands and pray that you would bless it and that you would help us to learn what you'd have us to learn and apply what you'd have us to apply so that we can go out and build the kingdom of God. We pray all these things in Christ's name. Amen. Amen.
It's good to be with you guys today. I see a lot of new faces that I haven't seen in any of our earlier sessions. Can I get a show of hands of anybody that's been to our Money Matters 1.0? All right, so we have a couple of seasoned pros here. I'm going to be leaning on you for interaction. We're counting on you. So for those of you guys that have not been to our other Money Matters talk, we covered some of the basics of finances and what it will take for you to get started. Kayla and I will recap some of that for you guys. Kayla, could you get us started?
Sure thing. So one of the first things that we talked about in Money Matters 1 is the basics of budgeting, right? Which is ultimately setting that foundation for our finances. Now, those basics of budgeting is comprised of ultimately 2 things, which is 1, our cash flow that we have coming in, right, which is our income. And we always want to increase that. But it also is comprised of our cash outflow, which is the cash that we have flowing out. Ultimately, that is our expenses. And we talked about how to monitor your expenses and keep those down so that your budget is working for you. And what else did we cover, Josh?
Talked about paying yourself first. We all have bills that are urgent. We all have needs to be paid each month. You got to pay for the roof over your head. You got to pay for your car if you have car payments. But it's also important to set aside money out of every paycheck to pay yourself first. If you don't have set amounts of money each month that is set aside for savings and for growth, it won't happen. If you're just leaving it to be the leftovers, often enough, it won't actually happen. So it's important to create a line item in your budget to pay yourself. Kayla, can you talk to us a little bit about mindset?
Absolutely. So in order for us to pay ourselves first, we have to have the mindset to do so, right? If you're not in the mindset to think about what it is that you're focused on, thinking about your financial goals, thinking about priority, you're not going to pay yourself first. The first person you're going to pay is the retailer where you wanted to go shopping, right? Or maybe even the restaurant where you wanted to go treat yourself to something really good because it's Friday and you just got paid and you're feeling awesome. And so ultimately the foundation is the foundation of our money management skills. Let's see here. So the next topic that we talked about in Money Matters, this is the pretty big one though.
Assets versus liabilities. Assets are something we need to be moving more towards. Liabilities we need to be moving away from. In short, assets are putting money in our pockets. Liabilities are taking money out. And you'll see this as a recurring theme throughout any business ventures that you have, any of your personal finances. You've got to be able to make a shift from all of your paycheck or your earnings going into liabilities and shift that towards assets to be able to grow wealth, to be able to grow savings, to be able to make tomorrow a better financial outlook than today.
So we talked about net worth, right? And how to figure out what your net worth is and monitoring your net worth, which is basically the difference between the assets and liabilities. So that kind of recaps what we talked about in Money Matters 1. So we talked about creating a budget and living from that budget. We've also talked about mindset. We've talked about paying yourself first. But today we're going to move into something a little bit more complex, right? It's sort of the next step to Money Matters 1. What's that all about, Josh?
So we're going to talk about savings, investing your savings, using your money to make money. Kayla, we've given our audience a recap of the basics. What are some next steps they can take?
Yeah, so the next step for you all to take, now this is great advice. The reason I say it's great advice, not because I'm saying it, right? But it's because this is some advice that can be applied to your life in general, not just your finances. This very first step. That very first step that we recommend after you've conquered the basics of money management is to start focusing on your future goals. Begin focusing on that long-term strategy as far as what you want in your finances. A lot of times we live in a microwave age. You guys familiar with what that is? You heard that term before? Yeah, we want everything instant. We want it now in 30 seconds, 60 seconds. And so when we're living in that way, sometimes it's difficult for us to think long-term, right? And that causes issues for us.
It does. And oftentimes without those goals, we don't really know if we are making progress. Short of goals, how do you know if your finances are a success? If you haven't set some kind of mile markers and milestones, how will you even know if you're getting ahead or if you are getting to the point where you want to be? Why do you think people struggle to keep their goals?
Because they are not practicing two words. And that is delayed gratification. How many of you are familiar with delayed gratification? Awesome. By show of hands, how many of you actively practice delayed gratification when it comes to your finances though? Awesome. I'd love to hear that. See, we got a few in here. In the middle here, right? We can do that a little bit. Well, when we talk about delayed gratification, just to clarify for some of us who are not sure what that is specifically, it's when you are making a temporary sacrifice for something that you want to gain in the long term, right? So when it comes to our finances, this is something that it really applies because we sacrifice some of the expenses, that we're spending on our finances monthly, but that's in order to focus on our long-term strategy and get our rewards later and not now in the microwave age.
some of us, I'm gonna be honest, don't have a income problem, we have a spending problem. I'm just gonna be real. So I think there was a study years ago about marshmallows, and they set a marshmallow in front of a young child and said, hey, we're gonna go in the other room and do something. When we come back, if you can not have eaten that marshmallow, we'll give you a second marshmallow. And these studies followed these kids as they got older. And there is definitely a correlation between their success in life in every facet, correlating to self-control and delayed gratification. Those kids that were able to not eat that marshmallow in anticipation of two marshmallows, as mundane as that sounds, demonstrated delayed gratification and were able to apply that in every aspect of life towards success. I think everyone needs some kind of a strategy. Kayla, what would you recommend?
Well, I kind of gave you guys a little sneak peek into that a little moment ago. I suggest that we all develop a long-term strategy. We all know what we want short-term. I'm pretty sure we can tell what we want to, maybe accomplish in the next 30 days or maybe even 6 months to a year. But have we started thinking about 10 years from now, right? Or maybe even 15 years from now? If we want to be successful in something that far from now, more than likely it's something big, right? It's something that you can't necessarily conquer within a couple years. So in order for you to do that, there has to be a long-term strategy in order for you to actually get there. So in order for you to start building this long-term strategy, there's a few questions you got to ask yourself when starting out. That very first question is, what do you want? You have to be very clear, crystal clear in exactly what it is that you want to accomplish in the long run, so that we can begin working it backwards and begin building a step-by-step program or a step-by-step process in regards to how to get there. Now, a lot of you may not know exactly what it is that you'll need to accomplish that long-term goal. A lot of times we don't know when we're starting out. But when you begin to build, let's say that your long-term strategy, your long-term goal is a brick wall, but we just have to start building that brick wall one brick at a time. And over time, you will look up and you will have a brick wall, which is your long-term strategy accomplished.
So true. If we have goals that we don't have a plan for, those are just dreams, right? And they're probably not going to be accomplished. If we don't have the ability to itemize how we're going to get to that goal, we're probably not going to get to it at all. So what are some ways to start making those goals into long-term realities?
Develop healthier money habits. Healthy money habits. Let's take a moment and just think. What are some of the current financial habits that you have right now? I don't want anybody to shout it out, right? You probably don't want anyone to know about what those, if those habits aren't that great. But I want you to think about the negative aspect of some of the financial habits that you have right now. And think about where they stem from, right? The foundation of a lot of the habits that we have is in our mindset. So one of the very first things that we can do is begin building a positive mindset, begin having positive expectations around our finances in general. A lot of the times, it's an increase in our income is what we're needing. Sometimes just cutting back on our expenses is not enough, right? But in order for us to make those changes and increase your income, you probably have to develop and increase, your own value in that workplace. And so that all starts with your mindset. One of the second things is going back to Money Matters 1 is monitoring your monthly spending by creating a budget and actually sticking to that budget. Now, if you're kind of just starting out and it's a little too overwhelming for you to plan 30 days of spending, that's okay. That's understandable because our money doesn't necessarily work in 30-day intervals, right? So if you need to break that down and plan a budget every 2 weeks or maybe even every week, you have to start where you are. At least you have eyes on your money. At least you're aware of what's going on with your finances. Now, the third thing following up from that is to review your progress and to do so regularly. Let's say that you do decide to create a budget every other week, right? 30 days is a little too much, so we're doing it every 2 weeks. Well, in that same process, every 2 weeks, we need to be monitoring our progress to make sure that we're sticking to our goals, right? Because that long-term strategy is ultimately what we want to accomplish. And so if we're focusing on that long-term strategy, we want to make sure that our actions, our habits, and our mindset is in alignment with what we want to accomplish later on in life. That is in alignment here today. And the last thing here, I got one more, is to become goal-oriented. That's a mindset thing as well. Once you become goal-oriented, you are focused on accomplishing that goal. You are focused on becoming the person that can actually achieve that goal. So I know that was a mouthful, but I felt like all of it was important when it comes to, understanding how to develop healthier money habits.
Yeah, your first point about mindset is so critical because everything else is going to follow. There's an analogy I like. Some of you guys know I own a heating and cooling company, and thermostats play a critical role in everybody's house for comfort. It doesn't matter what air conditioning unit or what furnace you have. It's not going to work if your thermostat doesn't work. And if your thermostat is set to 72 degrees, there's a pretty good chance that your house is going to be 72 degrees inside, right? Somebody can open up the door in the middle of the winter and give you a blast of cold air, and it can drop you down to 60 degrees, and it could be freezing in there, right? But once they shut the door, it's probably gonna go back up to 72 degrees. It's like our finances. If we don't change our mindset, we can have events that happen, and it may alter. We may get a raise at work, or we may come across a good side gig where we're making some money. But if we haven't changed our mindset, it's going to go right back to where we left off. So if we don't have a mindset set to growth and to building wealth and to delayed gratification, it's going to always revert back to the same position. This is why people struggle to get out of poverty, not necessarily because of the income, but because the mindset hasn't changed. So that's a powerful part of this. So Kayla, let's talk about savings and basic investing. Let's say our audience has already mastered what we've spoken about so far, and they've saved a little bit of money, and let's say a couple $1,000s. What does a person need to know to successfully get started just with the basics of banks and conventional investing?
Yes, good question. So one of the first things that we need to understand is, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this term, interest rates. By show of hands, how many of you are familiar with interest rates? Right, awesome, yep. Because we have to do what? We have to pay interest rates. And we always want to make sure that we are getting the lowest interest rate when it comes to maybe a loan, right? Or maybe any type of funds that you're borrowing. Ultimately, for those of you who may not be aware, your interest is the amount of money that you pay to a company in order to borrow money from them, right? So that interest rate can change over time. But when we talk about savings, when we talk about an investment or a savings account, you're not necessarily paying interest. It's actually the opposite, right? You're actually going to be getting that interest because the bank is then paying you to borrow your money. But the thing that's tricky about that is, with a traditional bank, the interest isn't always the same that they would charge you as they would give you when you're saving money. So let's talk about that interest rate a little bit more so that we can understand what that is, right? So we get the interest rate. That's an annual percentage rate. That's what the APR stands for. But we want to talk about APY, which is your annual percentage yield. When you're looking into investments and savings accounts, you're not going to see APR, you're going to see APY. And APY, again, is the annual percentage yield. That is the sort of say interest rate, right, that you will earn by keeping your money invested into this particular investment vehicle.
So let's say someone has $1,000 and they want to invest in just traditional savings investment tools. What are some ways we can do that?
Yeah, so let's start off with some of the basic ways that people use when they go to the bank, right? There's a few different types of accounts or investment vehicles that you can start out with. The most common that people use is your traditional savings account. Yes? How many of you have a savings account connected to your checking account? That's great. So the thing about that is, when we talked about that APY, the money that you're earning on that, are any of you familiar with what that percentage rate it is that you're getting? How much money you're earning? It's low. Oh yeah, it's low. Give me a specific number.
0.13.
0.4, yep, 0.1,
0.13.
yep.
Yep.
So ultimately, as long as you're starting with a 0 or maybe a 1, you're pretty accurate, right? So that's one of the first ways that people use to save their money, but I just wanna let you guys know that it's not the greatest way for you to invest and to build your savings. One of the second ways for you to invest in, using the traditional bank is money market accounts. By show of hands, how many of you familiar with money market accounts? All right, awesome. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, the money market account acts just like a regular checking account. One of the major differences is you are actually earning interest on this money market account. But there are some caveats to this account, just like any other ones, right? There's sometimes you have to have a minimum deposit in this account. You have to maintain this minimum deposit. If you don't, there are fees. There may be annual or monthly fees. One of the things for this account is there is a minimum to the amount of time that you can withdraw on a monthly basis. So why even have one of these accounts, right? Well, one of the positives is that it operates like a regular checking, so you can write a check, you can write checks, you can have a debit card, but you're still earning interest on those funds. But again, that's not an investment where you can earn a lot back on your savings, right? One of the third options with your commercial bank, or maybe even just some online accounts, is a high yield savings account. By show of hands, how many of you have heard of that particular investment option? Okay, so we got just a few less hands there. So a high yield savings account, it's a low risk investment. It's a fairly good investment, not low risk. The high yield savings account is a savings account where it operates just like a regular savings account, but it's called a high yield savings account. Simply because the interest rate that you earn from that is anywhere between 2 and 5%. The interest rates are a lot better than a regular savings account, right? And it's also better than a money market account. I recommend, if you're starting out with your first $1,000 or your first couple $1,000s, is to do your research and look into different high yield savings accounts. Because that would be a great place for you to keep your money as you're working on your strategy and you're growing it over time. Now, I do want to let you guys know that stay aware and read the fine print very well as far as the APY, because they do change in these high yield savings accounts. It's not indefinite, and it doesn't stay the same. And the last one that I want to share with you guys here that you can get from your traditional bank. I know that you guys have heard of these. When I was younger, I thought my bank is a music artist. You guys know what I'm getting to, right? CDs, certificate of deposits. That's another low risk option for investment. How CDs work is ultimately you would invest a specific amount of money. Like they'll tell you exactly how much the CD is worth. And they'll also tell you specifically what your annual percentage yield will be. So you'll know exactly how much money you're getting. One of the cons about this particular investment, though, is that you cannot touch the funds while it is being invested. It has to stay in the CD. But there's not too much wrong with that, because ultimately when you are investing funds, you want to make sure that this is money that you don't need and it can just sit there and build upon itself.
One thing I want to point out is not all banks are equal. Just because you have been banking with one bank all your life does not mean that's the best vehicle for your savings. Shop around, look around. There's a large range from bank to bank, credit unions, regional banks. If you bank at the larger ones like Huntington and Chase or Fifth Third that are local here, if that's all you're banking with, that's not necessarily the best vehicle for your savings, because oftentimes they don't have the best rates. Another thing I want to point out, well, actually a show of hands, how many of you guys know someone that got wealthy by interest from their bank savings? Yeah, I'll keep waiting. No, nobody. So don't just park it and forget it. If you're growing that, be active and be aware that that isn't the only medium to save your money. So what are a few things we need to be aware of with these what we call low risk investments?
Yeah, one of the first I kind of already mentioned, and you guys, as I mentioned before, right, the first step. It could apply to life in general. My response to this question, I believe, applies to life in general. It is read the fine print. Like, read everything. Literally, this is not just for your finances, it's not just for your investments, but it's very important that you understand what you're getting yourself into. Understand the fees that are involved, understand the account minimums that are required, understand how you will be able to get access to your funds if you needed to get access to it. Sort of speaking on the fine print, going back to what we were talking about before, credit unions, they're actually pretty good. They have good rates with certain things. I actually have a savings account with a credit union that I just have money automatically going in there. Well, reading the fine print, one day I just logged into my account. It was a few months that I didn't check it, but I noticed that the interest rate had increased to 7%. Like, I know that's sort of outside of the norm. But sometimes if you get a really good rate, right, sometimes it's more than likely it's a credit union, but they'll offer special promotions. And I said, well, look at that, 7%, from my normal bank. Now, that's not common, right? But that's just an example of staying aware of what's happening in your account and reading that fine print. Because once I noticed that, that's when you can make changes and move your money around, right? When you notice you have this 7% in this area, if you have a few $1,000s sitting over here in this account, we're going to go ahead and move that over here so we can earn more interest on that. So I just wanted to point out how important it is for you to read that fine print and stay in your accounts and look at what your finances are doing and how it's performing. So I know that was a pretty long one, but it was an important one. It was really important. The second thing is, just like you're doing here today, invest in your financial education, right? Don't allow your education around investing to stop just this class. Because this is just a conversation that we're having, right? This is just a few nuggets that we're throwing out, but I want to encourage you to really delve into understanding any type of investment vehicle that you want to get into. And lastly, is only invest the funds that you will not need, right? We don't want you to invest money and then you'll have to go back in there and get it 30 days from now, maybe even 60 days from now. So make sure that you're investing funds that you will not need in the future.
Probably the one exception to that is on these promotional high yield savings. There's no penalty for withdrawal during those promotional high yield. Put everything you got in there and take it out at will. But set a calendar reminder for when that teaser rate drops. If you have a good banker, he may remind you, but for the most part, it's on you to pay attention to this 4 months, 5 months that you're getting a promotional higher rate. If you're savvy, you'll roll that into another account or another bank that will continue to be high yield if you haven't found a better medium to invest in yet. So if it's just your liquid money that you need to keep available for your business or savings that you haven't found a better medium to invest in yet, be aware of it. Set calendar reminders when those teaser rates go down and see if there's any fine print where either you can start a new account, roll it into it, or look around what other banks or credit unions are offering good rates. But it is limited, right? This is really not meant for your life savings and large amounts of money. This is for your semi-liquid, medium, long-term savings. But that brings us to another topic of investing, and that's the stock market. Kayla, what are some ways to invest in the stock market? Simple methods.
Absolutely. So before I answer that question, it is important that I let you guys know that I am not an investment advisor. So we're not going to be giving investment advice here today, but we're going to be talking about it in general terms in terms of the financial education behind it, right? Being able to wrap our minds around the concept and understand simply just what it is. So one of the first methods, or one of the methods that I want to share with you, is actually a method that I had learned about several years ago. And I was really intrigued with this method because at first, I didn't really know too much about investing. And I was like, oh, well, this is a great way to get started. How many of you heard of the dollar cost average investment method? Show of hands. Awesome. One person. Awesome. I love when you guys don't know. That means I can tell you. It's just like I'm just telling you something you already know, right? Well, the dollar cost average investing method is a great way for you to start investing when you are starting out. as a beginner. Ultimately, this method works by you are investing the same amount of money into your investment vehicle on a regular basis. So ultimately, you're treating your investment like it's a monthly expense. And regardless of the amount of shares you're purchasing, sort of regardless of the market, you also want to make sure you're looking at that, make changes when needed. But regardless of the share price, you are going to invest the same dollar amount each month regularly. This is a strategy that can help you to get started into investing simply because you're constantly putting money into this savings of that, excuse me, not savings, but you're constantly putting money into this investment. Over time, you're becoming familiar with how it operates, you're becoming familiar with the different options that are out there, and you will begin to know when it's best to move your money from this account over to this account.
We have a question online. If we have to pause for a second.
Sure.
Is there a site where one can find various bank interest rates on a regular basis?
There are a lot of sites out there. I actually looked them up myself. I don't want to give one particular site because there are so many. But I do encourage you to, one, look into the specific bank that you're interested in. You always want to go to the source. I will say that for sure. When you begin looking for interest rates, it's going to happen. You're going to come up with sites that say 8 best interest rates or, 10 best accounts with the highest rates. It's okay to check it out, but go to the source and actually look at the source. That goes back to the point that I had made a moment ago, is read the fine print. Search around and make sure that it works. You wouldn't allow someone in your house, right? And allow them to stay there, get comfy, put their feet up and eat a meal with them unless you really knew them and you understood what they were about, right? You actually got to know them a little bit. So I want to encourage you to treat your finances the same way.
Good question. So if you were getting started investing and you hadn't had prior experience in the stock market, what would be some relatively low risk, easy ways to get started in that? What would you be putting some money into?
Absolutely. So the first thing that I would suggest is not the stock, right? That's a little bit risky. You buy one stock and if that company doesn't perform the greatest, you're a little hit, right? If they perform great, it's awesome. But it may be a little scary until the next time you see that company go down, the company value go down. So what I would suggest for safe investments for beginners is, one, to understand and look into mutual funds. By show of hands, how many of you have heard of the term mutual funds? Awesome, I love that. All right. So you all understand that a mutual fund is basically a pool. It's a pool of various stocks from different companies. So therefore, you're spreading your diversification amongst various companies and your risk isn't as high, right? And so mutual funds is the first option that I would suggest. It's awesome because you can use that dollar cost average method to do that. The second that I would recommend is index funds. How many of you have heard of index funds? Awesome. All right, just a few less hands. So index funds, they're ultimately a mutual fund, right? Which is where you have a pool of various stocks in this particular investment vehicle. But the thing about index funds is it operates off of a market benchmark. So for example, it operates off of the S&P 500 altogether. So if the S&P 500 does not do too great, then this specific index fund will not do too great, or it'll do awesome if the S&P 500 is doing amazing. Same thing for the NASDAQ. There may be an index fund that's tied directly to the performance of the NASDAQ market. Those are two of the safest investment vehicles that I would like you guys, or excuse me, that I would suggest for you to research and learn about before you get into, simply because it gives you an option to diversify, to spread your risk across different areas.
Awesome. So a little bit of warning about the stock market, you start playing with the stock market, just know that there is risk of losing your principal, right? And it is a good idea, like Kayla said, to use index funds. What some of people that are investing don't understand is there are costs associated with the management of any fund. Some are high and some are low. And this is why it's important to look into the individual funds, look and see what the cost per for the management. Sometimes there's multiple levels of management overseeing all these different funds. Index funds are kind of nice because their management fees are minuscule. They're literally just somebody that's just keeping a tab on S&P 500, the largest 500 companies, or the NASDAQ, the industrial. So it's a very low cost overhead. So it's easier to just put your money in it and forget it if you're doing index funds. Index funds may not be the most glamorous. When people are bragging about their ridiculous returns, probably wasn't index funds. If the market is going well, it is definitely better than your savings account at the bank, right? However, if the market's going down, it could be worse than your savings account because you can not only make nothing, you can actually lose principal. If you are emotional about your investing, you will lose money. If you see your stocks are going down, especially if you just are using index funds, if it's going down, do not touch that money. Look, historically, nobody's lost on index funds over time, right? It would have to be cataclysmic. The world would have to end and our monetary system would have had to have failed and all the largest companies in the entire world would have had to have failed for those to go down to zero, unlike individual stocks, right? Who has had a hot stock tip from their friends? Anybody ever? Like, you should invest in, all right. So my next warning is avoid hot stock tips. They're almost never legitimate. And most of the people that are giving that advice usually don't even understand the underlying fundamentals of these companies. It doesn't take very long for you to go on any of these little stock platforms, trading platforms. I used to love TD Ameritrade, but they don't exist anymore. And look at the financials. You can get a summary of this business that you're about to invest in, and you can find out how much cash do they have on reserves. The company is burning $100 billion a year, and they only have $50 million of reserves. They might be in for some problems. But if their stock is going down, their annual yield is $5 billion, and they have $20 billion in reserves, that might be a safe investment, and it might even be buying in at a low time on a safe company because they could go years without earning anything and still not go belly up, right? So understanding the fundamentals of the individual stocks is critical if you're going to venture into individual stocks. Yes, there's more money to be made in individual stocks, but also more risk. If you don't understand the fundamentals of the individual stocks you're investing in, that's gambling. That's not investing. Don't let anybody fool you. A hot stock tip, that is no different than going to Vegas and betting on anything you want. You don't know the fundamentals. You don't know if it's going to rise or drop. You can't control the outcome of these companies, right? The company could crash tomorrow. You can't stop it from failing. So if you don't know the underlying fundamentals, don't invest in it. Take a little bit of time to learn about the stock market before you go from index funds and mutual funds to individual stocks. You can get a book like Stock Market for Dummies. I read that. It was perfect for me. Believe it or not, there's a lot of good information in it. It's kind of broken down. So avoid the hot stock tips. Don't be a day trader. Not until you have had a lot of experience. And I wouldn't say I'm a very experienced trader, but I've had a number of years of doing it. And at one point in time, I was trading maybe 10, 15 times a day in and out. And I got a notification from the Federal Trade Commission that I was labeled a day trader. And I was like, am I in trouble? No, it was just a number of trades that you were doing with the volume. If you understand the underlying fundamentals, yes, you can get in and out minutes at a time, in, out, and it can reduce your risk. However, you don't very well know the fundamentals of that individual company that you're investing in, you can lose everything very quickly. when what we call, the market is in a bull market when it's rising, right? When everything is just going up, it'll be across the board. These index funds, everything, everybody looks like a rock star. And everybody looks like they're a great trader when the market is overall rising. Warren Buffett had an expression that I love. He said, when the tide goes out, find out who is swimming without clothes on, right? When that market is receding, when we get into what we call a bear market, when it's drawing back, it's shrinking, you watch the values drop, and people are pulling their money out of the market. That's when you start finding out, did you look at the fundamentals of the company? Strong fundamentals will still continue to grow, even in a bear market. But the overall market trend will still go down. So do your research, learn your fundamentals. Don't get stuck in the fear of missing out, the FOMO investing, because that is how you lose all your money in the stock market.
So it seems like you kind of hit on a couple of the points that we talked about before. Is one, read the fine print. Make sure that you're reading the fine print and understand everything. And invest in financial investing education. Really understand stocks, before you start investing into that. Understand the mutual funds, understand the company and how well they have been performing historically. Know your stuff, ultimately.
Educate yourself, it's worth it, for
Absolutely.
sure. So where would be an easy way to get started investing?
Yeah, so one of the places that I would recommend is Fidelity. I know that you guys are pretty familiar with that. You've heard of it. A lot of you might already have an account with them based upon your employer with your 401k. The reason why I suggest Fidelity, I've actually did some investing with them, not just for retirement, but also, for mutual funds and index funds as well. There are other companies out there, right? There are a lot out there, but Fidelity is one of those top ones that I would recommend. A company that's similar to that is like Vanguard, but yet again, I will not stress it enough. Do your research, find out what companies are available and really look into them. Look into if they're a credible company for you. Make sure that their accounts are suitable for your needs.
Yeah, not everything is a perfect fit for everyone, right? We all have different risk tolerances, and we're at different points in our life. Some of us can afford to lose a little bit, some of us cannot afford to lose anything. So make sure it's right for you, not just everybody thinks it's a cool thing to invest in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Josh, you have some proven ideas from your friends when it comes to building wealth and leveling up your money. I really believe that learning from real life examples is helpful, right? It helps us to understand how we can actually make some changes and implement some of these things that we're learning. So I want to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit more about some real life examples, situations. Can you share with us some ways about how you've experienced or friends that you've known have built wealth using assets that they already have?
Yeah. I think first story that comes to mind that I think is a great win with one of my friends right now. My friend Emilio, who's a flying buddy, I don't know how many of you guys know, I fly paramotors. So it's a bad habit. Once you get started, you'll never quit. And your family will get tired of hearing you talk about it, so don't get started. But one of my flying buddies, he worked from a job that he worked from home some of the time a few years ago, and he also was very close to his office where he worked from. So he had a little one wheel that he would ride to work with, and he realized his Honda HR-V that he was making payments on was sitting in his driveway unused probably 4 or 5 days a week. He posted his car on Turo. How many of you guys have heard of Turo? All right, so you guys are familiar. Turo is a platform kind of like Airbnb where you can be the rental company. You can rent out your car. You can either deliver it or have them come to you. There's different ways to do that. He started renting out his car on Turo, and within the first month, he was making his car payments just with the off days that he didn't need his car. He continued this for a little while before he had a conversation with me again about it. And it's like, do you think you could make a business out of this? Like, well, you could, but where would you, because he didn't have a whole lot of savings, like where would you grow with this? He's like, well, Tesla has a no money down option right now, and I really want a Tesla. Okay, so he bought a Model 3, brand new, and listed it on Turo. He was making his payments plus money right away. Within the first month, he'd already started making his payments. He had high months where he made 2-3 times his payments, and low months where he didn't make his payments, but year average after his first year, he made money, and they were paying down his car for him, and he got to drive his fun car. We had another conversation not too long ago, and he's like, I think I should scale and do more. And I don't know how much like time he has to invest in it. So we sat down and thought about it for a while, and he wound up involving his younger sibling to do some transportation options. He bought a second Model 3. And as of the last time we spoke, he is cash flowing average above payments every month. He now has 3 cars on Turo, and he's making a side gig and paying down debt. So when those cars are paid off, I think he's got 5-year loans on each of his cars. He'll have acquired an asset at basically no cost, as well as made some money along the way. Then when they're paid off, he can either choose to sell them, roll that into another one, and have a better cash flow, or he can keep them and keep renting them maybe at a lower rate. So he has options, right? He's built both long-term equity through the debt pay down, as well as some monthly cash flow. And I think that's a fun story because it's an easy entry point. It may not be for everybody if you have no flexibility in your time or you need your vehicle every day. But most of us have a vehicle. And most of us have at least 1 or 2 days a week that we don't need our vehicle. If it's just sitting there, that's an option you can play with.
Yeah, that's super cool. So how many of you guys have an extra vehicle that's just sitting at home? Hey, okay. So maybe you guys just got a little bit of an idea as far as how you can make some extra money with that. All right, that was awesome. So I used to work at a company where this guy, he shared with me this concept called domain flipping. Now I don't want to get too far into it, but I heard this was a pretty cool way for you to build wealth and to make some money without having to put in too much effort. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I want to preface this with, for almost every one of the stories I'm going to tell you about, you're going to find a common thread through them. That common thread is somebody plugging their unique abilities or unique advantage or experience in, where they have a competitive advantage over other people, or they already have experience in a field. So my friend Daniel is one of the lead guys with Robin Tech, who's one of the premier web development companies in Central Ohio. And he already had a finger on the pulse on the industry. He'd been working in this industry for a while, and he got to see kind of common threads of what successful websites sounded like and looked like. So he started buying domains that were catchy or looked good, that weren't already taken. And not just buying and holding, because there's a lot of people that will just buy it and think the world's going to come to them, and that may or may not work. But Daniel had a unique strategy in that he would buy specific sites and then contact those companies and market to them. So if he found a site that sounded like a business name or looked good, he would buy it and then actively find out who he could talk to, call, email, text, whatever it took, or even go meet with business owners and say, hey, I have this website that could help you gain traction, internet traffic. Would you like to buy it for X, Y, and Z? And it was very profitable for him. And I know he did that for a number of years, and not coincidentally, my ex-business partner and I got our ColumbusHeatingandCooling.com from him. So he had the knack for snagging any good website available. Some of them you were just like, job, like that. It's not taken yet, like almost disbelief. But again, he had a finger on the pulse of the industry. That was his unique skill set that he was able to plug in and make extra money.
That's super cool. That's awesome. You're basically trying to find out what the company needs before they even realize they need it, and then sell it to them. Kind of like how a lot of marketing works today. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. So I've also heard about another term called angel investing, right? And I heard that that's a great way for you to invest in startups. But I want you to help us to understand that topic a little bit more.
Yeah, so this is a little bit more advanced, and if you haven't already done other forms of investing, just tuck this away for future. I would say this is more of the small percentage of your portfolio, high chance for gain, high chance for losing everything strategies. So if you're younger, you can probably implement more of these, maybe a larger percentage of your portfolio. But if you are at a position where you can't afford to lose any of your investments, just stay away from this altogether. So angel investing is basically investing in a startup company where you're owning a small piece of that company. You're not going to get a guaranteed return. There's no date that you're going to get any guaranteed anything. In fact, you may not get anything at all. Company may go under before they ever become profitable, and you'll lose your whole investment. The goal is, once the company grows to a certain size, it either gets sold or becomes profitable enough to have profit sharing, at which point in time, you either have a long-term play if it's profit sharing, or you get a lump sum payout if the company just sells. There's a lot of startups that just grow to a certain point with the sole goal of being bought out. You see a lot of those startups in the medical industries, where there's a startup, they grow with the sole intention of being bought out by one of the bigger players. In which case, if you were an angel investor in those, you would get a lump sum payout. Other companies have a longer term goal, and once they reach a profitable status, you become a profit sharing owner in your business. But I can't stress enough, you need to understand the market and the business and how they are running their funds. The greatest idea in the world, if it's run by people that don't have fiscal responsibility, will fail, I promise. Same as your personal finances, same as Uncle Sam. If he spends more than he brings in, well, I won't go there. But it doesn't matter where you're at. If you don't have fiscal responsibility, you're going to fail. Same with these kinds of investments. Understand their underlying financials. Are they being responsible? Are they spending to be flashy? Or are they really bootstrapping at the beginning and making ends meet to get to that profitable point? So understanding both the industry that they're in and their underlying fundamentals will kind of help you understand, is this a deal or a dud?
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to my next question. What are your thoughts about lending money, right? For that person that says, hey, Josh, can you be my angel investor? You know, somebody that they're pretty close to you. They may have a relationship with you. They know you. What are your thoughts about that? What is that called?
Cringe. So what I'm going to talk about in relation to that is business related lending. Okay. So a personal loan, that's on you. Give them the money, loan them the money, that's between you and your friend or relative or whatever. I'm not going to address that. However, for peer-to-peer lending, as a small business startup, if you're going to lend to somebody, they need to have a business plan, right? You need to be able to see that, does this make sense? Or do you have a chance of getting paid back? And you need to get some kind of a written exact agreement of the term, right? So is this a 1-year balloon with a 15% interest rate, and it's for $2,000? So then you would have written out on day 366, $300 is due, plus the original $2,000, and get it signed and notarized. Right? Also, get some kind of collateral. Even the Bible is clear on this, where if you lend to somebody, you might want to take their cloak. I'm not saying leave them destitute. Maybe don't invest with somebody that, like, if they lose it, it ruins them, right? Because then that kind of puts you in a moral dilemma. But maybe they have a fancy watch or something that's worth an extra vehicle they don't use, something that's worth enough to make you whole if they fail in their business entity or they're just not responsible and they lose everything. Get that in writing as well. Put a serial number down or a VIN number down or whatever as that guaranteed collateral. Because I would say a good portion of peer-to-peer lending, both parties oftentimes don't have enough business experience to guarantee success. So maybe plan for the worst, hope for the best if you're gonna do that. It can be very beneficial for both parties. It can be a good thing if it's done right. If it's on a handshake, it's not done right. I'm all about honoring your word and that handshake being good enough for the business. But guarantee it by writing, right? Start with a handshake, end with a handshake, but have a good contract written up. Contracts help keep friends, help keep businesses going strong. If it isn't in writing, it didn't happen. So if you had a good conversation with them and they promised you this, that, and the other, but it's not written, signed on, did it really happen? Probably. It doesn't really count. And if you're unfortunate enough to have a bad turnout, it's not going to turn out in your favor.
And so that's when, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about, that's when you'll find yourself on like maybe People's Court, right? Maybe Judge Judy, I'm pretty sure she's still out. She's still making rulings. So speaking of TV shows, I remember several years ago, I was just obsessed with watching Storage Wars on A. How many of you guys have watched Storage Wars? Yeah, and I was just so obsessed with them going in, right, and auctioning for this storage and seeing how much money they could make out of it. So I just thought that was super cool. I heard that you had a story, some experience in this, and how someone was able to make some money using Storage Wars. Tell us about that.
So before the show ruined it for everybody, I had built our home that we lived in. And during that time, I really shut down some of the repeat referral work that I had for my small businesses. And so I had a slow season after finishing building our home, probably 3 or 4 months before work picked back up. And I got into storage auctions. I don't even remember what gave me the idea, but I went around and would go and for somebody that didn't pay their rent for, I think usually the threshold is like 6 months on most of them, but if they stop paying rent, they legally have the right to auction the contents of the storage unit to reimburse themselves for lost rent and to get the space back, right? I can remember one that they opened up the door. There was probably 4 or 5 of us. Again, this was before Storage Wars, so there wasn't 50 people bidding against you. And we're all, you're not allowed to walk in, right? You're from the outside and you're looking in, and we're all looking at this bright, almost brand new Husqvarna chainsaw. And you get to know the value of things, and it was about a $450 chainsaw. So everybody's bidding on that bright orange chainsaw. But I look and I see a pile of lumber. This is like virgin forest oak, wide beams, 10 to 12 feet long, 12 to 16 inches wide, some of them 20 inches wide, which is almost unheard of in the lumber industry these days. And I see the stack that's like the size of a small car of lumber. And I'm like, chainsaw's nice, but the wood, and everybody's still fixated on this chainsaw. So the bidding went up to like $350. I won because I was going to get that bought no matter what. And there was a bunch of woodworking tools that I got that I still use to this day. I was able to sell the stack of lumber for like 2,000 and some change, and still kept enough to build all the custom furniture in our house that we had on our first house, and kept the chainsaw for 15 years, clearing the land for even my second house that I built. And then I sold that chainsaw probably 18 years later after using it a lot for more than I paid for the whole storage auction. So that's probably my favorite storage auction story. There also was ones where we bought a lot of trash and you had to find somewhere to throw it away. So they weren't all that amazing, but overall it was actually a great side gig. If Storage Wars has died down and people have forgotten about it, it could still be a very viable option to get into.
That was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. So you guys don't go looking up all of the storage places. Maybe pick a couple. You have a question over here?
Yeah, when you talk about fiscal responsibility, the government and all that, some of us have been here a while. Knows. Have you
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So
Can you repeat the question before you answer it? so that we can hear
yes,
it
the
a little
question
better?
was precious metals, gold, silver, platinum. People are talking about not having fiscal responsibility in the government and it perhaps being a investment to protect against inflation. I happen to have some very strong opinions on that. It is just my opinion, but I'm going to base my opinions on historical data. Right? So if you were to look at charts of the value of gold, if you were to have invested 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and look and see what you would get now. I would say with almost no exceptions, except for little blips in between those decade marks, you would have been better off in stocks, funds, even your bank savings accounts. Because gold does this, and it might go up over time, but it is artificially held down. There are dynamics that we can't control that keep it pushed down in value, and those values will not be raised. It is not an investment, in my opinion. It is a hedge. So if you are concerned about currency in general just disappearing and you want to be able to buy a loaf of bread for your family, maybe consider silver, because it'd be really hard to cut up your 1 ounce coin that's now worth $2,200, I think, somewhere around a little over $2,000. It'd be really hard to like cut it up to get that loaf of bread, right? Right. So if you're buying it just as like a backup, maybe you have some extra money and you want to just play it safe and have something as an alternate for worst case scenario, maybe buy silver instead of gold. Silver has a industrial use. Every chip that's made, every circuit board that's made utilizes silver. So it has an industrial value and a demand that will always be there no matter what, even if people don't want it for jewelry. So it also, I don't know what the current value is, $18, $20. Oh, it has gone up. $25 an ounce. You could buy your loaf of bread if you were starting with an ounce of silver, right? But easier than your $2,200 gold coin. Again, it is not investment. It's $25, but 15 years ago, it was 19, and then it went down, then it went back up, right? 15 years ago, if you would have invested in almost anything, it would be worth more, right? So could it be a hedge? Useful? Yes, it's not an investment in my opinion.
Good advice. Good advice and great question.
Great question.
Good question. All right,
Yes.
so,
Could you talk about, when you're just getting started, the value of paying in cash versus using a credit card? I always heard that, the credit card companies are making it easier and easier to used to be slide, now it's this. I just came back from China, they're doing all QR codes on their phone. And I heard they did a study on when you pay with cash, your brain looks like it's in pain. And then when you pay with a credit card, you just swipe,
Yeah.
brain looks like it's in pleasure.
That's a good question, but I need to ask a pre-question. When you said getting started with what?
Budgeting.
Budgeting. All right. So if fiscally you have a track record of not being perhaps super responsible, cash is a beautiful thing because as you pointed out, you have to give something up and you can run out, right? If you have a good track record of being responsible, you already have a budget, you already have savings, and you already are paying yourself first consistently, credit card can be a very useful tool, right? I had years, 10, 15 years ago when I was starting a business, we did it all on a credit card. Every expenditure, we had the money, but we were maxing out the card every month, paying it off 2-3 times a month. I think I made almost $20,000 that year on cashback. It was heating, cooling, and we were buying parts constantly from the supply houses. We just used this card. So it can be a useful tool. It can also ruin you if you don't have the right mentality. That should only be like a check. You don't write a check if you don't have money in your account, right? You don't charge your card if you don't have money in your account. So if you've gotten to a point where you already have a track record of being responsible, credit cards are a fine tool. They can also get you a lot of trouble if early on you're not responsible. Good question.
I like to look at the credit card rewards, like coupons. Cause you know how sometimes if you know, get a coupon and you'll kind of force yourself to buy another one or buy something extra just so that you can use the coupon, right? I don't want you to force using, you know, your credit card just to get the points. If you're not there yet, right? If you don't have that discipline set up, if you haven't actually practiced it and been successful with making sure you're paying off your card, don't use the coupon. Just go ahead and just continue doing what it is that you're doing and build until you get to that point to where you're disciplined enough to use your credit card and then pay it off and reap the benefits of those points.
If you ever get to the point where you're not paying off your card in full every month, don't use it, because those cash back is a small percentage. Your fees are a huge percentage. 1 month of not paying it will exceed a year of the same cycles of your cash back. So if there is ever a risk you will not pay it off in full at the end of that month, avoid it. Get a plan to avoid using it altogether until you're back into a situation where you have excess funds and you have a good budget where you're responsible, you have money to pay it consistently without getting close to a barrier. If you ever think it's a loan for the future, just stop using it, cut it out, throw it away.
Good question. Great answer. All right. So how many of us in here have like a special collection of something? Special, what is it? What you have a special collection?
Instruments,
Instruments.
yes.
That could be pretty valuable. Okay, so you're an artist. Awesome. Anyone else special collections? What you got? Coins. Nice, very nice. So you guys may be interested in a story that Josh will share with us here today. What's a strategy that we can use when it comes to our special collections and growing our wealth using them?
I'm going to actually kind of cross over 2 points here that we were going to make with that. So I have a number of friends that utilize their unique experience or collections or just a lifelong hobby of some sorts. A couple of my friends and a friend of my son's trade limited edition sneakers. So my friends will, they know the right shoes and they know the ones that are so limited edition that you can't get them, and they know the ones that people want. And sometimes they're doing regular athletic shoes, but usually it's only if they're buying in like large quantities and they're really cheap. But someone like me that wouldn't know the first thing about sneakers, I have no shoe style. I will say my son was kind enough to loan me his shoes today because he has better style than I do. I would not participate in something like that because I don't have that competitive advantage. Remember what I said early on in these stories. If you have a unique ability, hobby, passion, anything, it can usually be monetized. It can usually become a side gig because that's your unique strength, right? That's your secret weapon that you have an advantage over everybody else that you can utilize to create wealth, right? Another friend, Kyle, he grew up in a sports-centric home. Eat, sleep, breathe sports. His brothers, same thing, super competitive. Eventually he wound up owning a CrossFit gym. Like sports is his thing. So he was collecting sports cards when he was younger. How many of you guys have bought like baseball cards, basketball cards, anything like that? Yeah. I never made money when I was a kid. I was collecting cards like everybody talked about their value, but I never quite figured out how to make that work. But Kyle figured out how to make that work in that he would buy whole collections and he would separate out all the numerous like low value cards and sell them back out as a collection again for about the same as he bought the collection for. And then you take all the really valuable ones and he knew how to sell them. He also knew which ones were valuable because he had been involved in sports his whole life. He knew every player, he knew their stats, he knew the probability of them staying on top. Or I mean, he knew sports inside and out, so he made money on that. So again, I wouldn't make money in that field because I'm not really that much into sports. I don't have that travel knowledge 2 to 3 decades of every player's stats and just understanding that. So
That's pretty cool. So Amazon, that's a popular company right now. And a lot of people are making money on Amazon in different ways. But I want to kind of talk about another way to make money with Amazon. You had told me a little bit about a story about purchasing Amazon pallets. I remember seeing, we were talking about, Steve and I was talking about ads earlier today. I remember seeing an ad on social media. This girl, she purchased this big pallet of all this stuff from Amazon. She was just unpacking it. And she made a lot of money doing so. And I was like, how? What is she doing? Can you tell us about, do you know about that?
yeah, so I have a friend, Angela, who does buy pallets from Amazon, and she will buy the unknown pallets, right? So it's shrink wrapped in a box, and you don't really know. You may know kind of a genre, what it might be, but you don't really know the contents. And she'll separate it out from the broken stuff that's pretty much junk, and she'll bulk sell. And kind of like from the car, she'll still try to recoup her costs out of just kind of somewhat junk, trying to sell that to the next person that wants to maybe fix them because she hasn't fixed them. Then she'll separate the stuff that's maybe open box, maybe a little bit of damage or maybe used, and she'll sell those on Facebook Marketplace or eBay, depending on the size of the item. And then she'll separate out the stuff that is like literally new, and then she'll usually sell that either back on Amazon or on eBay. I will say, if you're prone to being a hoarder, this is not for you. Just don't even go there. Could you make money? Yes, you're gonna have a bunch of mess in your home. Like your garage is not gonna be a garage anymore. You're not gonna park your cars in the garage, your basement. Your significant other is gonna be on board because you're gonna be like a lot of mess. So unless you're an organized person, maybe don't dabble in this.
It's another A&E show for
Yeah,
us.
or yeah. So similarly, I used to buy stuff from the hardware store. So I built homes. I did remodeling when I was younger, and so I'm very knowledgeable about power tools. Doesn't matter what the power tool is. Doesn't matter what the trade is. I can do it. I can use it. So I understand the value, and I know the brands that are hot. I know what the guys want. I know what can fall apart. I know the ones that will hold their value. I know the hot sellers. I know the duds. So especially a couple decades ago when I had a little more time, I would always just kind of take a look at the clearance section at Home Depot and Lowe's, and the guys got to know me. They'd even like text me like, hey, we got this. And I would go buy. I remember one time they were getting rid of the DeWalt 18-volt nickel cadmium battery system. Anybody remember the NiCad batteries? Yeah, like they had memory effect and they didn't work in the cold or whatever, but they were like the mainstay of tools for every contractor for like 10 years, like the standard. Well, Lowe's decided to clearance out a whole lot of them to make room for the new lithium tools. But I've worked in the field and I've used these tools, and I know that not every contractor is going to go throw out $10,000 worth of tools because there's a new battery system. They're still going to use their old tools, right? And they need new batteries to keep them running. So I went over there and I saw a $200 two battery and a charger combo marked down to like $50. And I negotiated a little bit. I'm like, if I buy them all, can you take that down a little bit? And so I think if I remember right, I paid like $30 per, even less than that. And I bought like 45 of them. So I had a few $1,000s in it. Now, mind you, I didn't have a lot of risk because I still had 30 days to return it if I was wrong, right? But I knew my tools and I was familiar with it. I split it up. I didn't just resell those packages. I actually opened it up and sold individual batteries, individual chargers, and I made tens of thousands of dollars on that because I was buying for 10 cents on the dollar. And contractors were still, it was a bargain. Anywhere else, it was still full price, right? So that was a very low risk purchase that I was able to turn into more money. I was doing this constantly back when I had a little bit more time. If you notice a common theme though, it took a little bit of money up front to make this money, right? People don't realize it, but that's actually an investment, right? So if you understand, again, you better have your finger on the pulse of whatever it is you're dabbling in. If random person was buying them, one, they wouldn't know their value or who to market them to, wouldn't know good from bad, right? Around the same time, Ryobi discontinued their lineup. I didn't touch them because I knew they were just a consumer grade product and people would just throw away their old stuff and buy a new kit in that market. They weren't profession. So takes a little bit of money, and I sat on a little bit of money, right? I think I had like $5,000 in all the purchases during that time of just tool related stuff that I was reselling, but I made many multiples on it. It takes money to make money. So you have to develop some kind of fiscal responsibility, start saving money, put that money aside in your money market account or whatever while you're growing it. And then the best gain you're going to get is your own businesses, right? You're not going to get rich in your savings account. You're not going to probably retire wealthy because you got your 5% intro rate at Huntington's this month. But that could be a good medium to save while, and also to keep your cash in during in between, right? So understanding both sides of this, investing and just the savings, go hand in hand, because when you're not invested in something, it should be doing something for you while it's waiting.
That's great advice. Kind of goes back to, focusing on our long-term strategy and doing what it is that you can do today, right? Even though you're not going to get rich or you're not going to get wealthy from that introductory 5% rate, it's just important that you do start somewhere. So I'm loving these stories so far because I'm realizing that it's creativity, right? We just have to be a little bit more creative when it comes to our money-making skills, or should we say our money-flipping skills, right? So I want to talk a little bit, let's pivot a little bit more into something that's not as creative, but it's something that's required, real estate. How many of you guys are interested in real estate? All right. How many of you guys know that we have the real estate guru sitting here with us today? So I want to take a moment and let's talk about that for a moment. So I don't have a real estate license. However, I would like to get involved in real estate, right? And invest in different property, and make money that way. Is there a way that I can get involved in the market and, get invested in real estate without actually going through the licensing procedures and all of those things?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to invest in real estate, no matter where you're at on the spectrum. If you have some level of savings, you can get involved with real estate. Now, your returns are going to vary greatly depending on what level of investing you're doing. I will say the best deals are unfortunately reserved for what we call accredited investors, net worth of $1 million or 300,000 combined household income or 200,000 individual. That probably doesn't apply to most of us. And it seems unfair that that's probably the hands down best returns. But the reasoning, there is a rationale behind it. It's caveat emptor, it's buyer beware, it's completely on you, and the government is not vetting these deals. You could lose all of your money on these deals. They're not monitored by the Federal Trade Commission. They're not, you need to be savvy, right? And so the reason why the government has a threshold for that is they think, well, by the time you got there, you probably have developed the skills and experience to be able to vet a good deal from a bad deal. You're probably not going to get taken advantage of by a predator, right? Because there's plenty of outfits out there that want to take your money. You say there's probably more of that than the other. Most of the people that are offering their great product either don't have a great product or don't really know what they're doing anyways, and they're probably going to lose your money. So on a smaller scale, on the other end of the spectrum, there are like small fractional real estate options that you can invest in, like Fundrise or Ground Floor. Ground Floor, you can invest as little as like $10, right? And those are not guaranteed returns. Again, this is like the stock market, only you're getting the diversification of real estate base, right? So you're getting a small fraction of ownership, just like you would in the stock market. You get a small fraction of ownership in a stock. Your returns are somewhat similar to the stock market. I think 7-ish% returns is pretty typical there. Again, you could lose, it's not guaranteed, but it's maybe a step better of returns than anything you're going to get from a bank product typically. And it's more stable for a long time. These aren't intros, they're real estate based, right? So they may sell a property that you own a fractional amount of interest in, but they can just roll it into the next one. It's just like a really small entry point. Fundrise has options as low as like $500. They have a little bit better returns. I think Historically, they're like around 8%. Again, some deals lose money, some deals do better. So don't take this as I'm endorsing these products. Do your own homework, look at the risk, Google it, go to Reddit. You want to go down that rabbit hole, see what other people are saying, right? And not just what they're saying, but research the fundamentals of the company and find out, hey, are they legit? Josh talked about it yesterday, but did they just make a bad financial decision the next day to where they're not even a viable company and they're a high risk company, right? Do the research. I can't stress this enough on every aspect. It will pay off. And the habit of spending a few hours digging, it'll get easier and easier. You'll start to understand these financial terms. You can go to Investopedia online. It's free and it will give you a pretty good definition reliably of any term that you don't understand. Super important. If there's a term that you don't understand in an investment, figure out what it is before you invest in it. So when you're researching things, don't just like eyes glaze over like, oh, it should be good. Learn, because there will come a point where you will get more and more savvy and you'll be able to identify good versus bad and you'll be able to beat the odds and make better returns, lower risk. You'll see less of a chance of failure. Over time, it'll get better and better and better as long as you're educating yourself. If you're just kind of throwing it at the wall in the dark and just like hope it wins, again, it's a lot like gambling. Right? So if that's your propensity, take some time to learn or stick with more conventional methods that don't involve risk. If you're involving risk, you have a greater chance of bigger returns, right? Risk versus reward, the higher the risk, oftentimes the higher the reward. Higher the chance also of losing everything, including your initial principal. Don't assume because it's high risk that it's high return either though. Look at the fundamentals. How's the underlying cash of the company? How are they running? What was their trailing 12-month income? What was their trailing 24-month income? Did it trend down or up? Did it trend down just because the economy in general is in a bear market trending down? Well, then you maybe can't count that against it the same. Was the whole economy in a bull market rising and they trended up? Well, yeah, they look like a rock star, but so does everybody else. That doesn't count so much either. Kind of look at the overall chart of the economy during that time and keep that in mind when you're looking at the company's growth, right? Everybody looks great when everything's going up. Everybody just goes up with the tide, right? Tide goes up, everybody's floating, everybody goes up. Everybody looks great. Yes, my stocks are going up. I'm a rock star. I'm a day trader. I'm a crypto genius because I made a bunch of money. Well, it's nice. You were in at the right time. Okay. But then when it drops, did you lose everything? Do your research on each individual, whatever avenue you're going. Again, so if it's real estate, do your investigation on the underlying core. And if you get to the point where you're doing your own deals, you're buying real estate deals, that is even more critical. How are the school districts? What's the trending of this area? Did it make money? That's great. So did everybody else. But when the economy drops back down, will this be one of the ones that goes down with it, or will it continue to climb because it's a high demand area? Right? So in every aspect, whether you're a millionaire and you're an accredited investor and you're doing skyscraper deals and huge stuff, or you're putting $10 in to your ground floor, do your research, learn. The more you learn, the more you can earn.
I love that. The more you learn, the more you can earn.
Call me that. I'm smart.
I'm gonna use it though, just to let you know, I'm gonna use that. We have a question right here.
Do you have any resources for like creating a business plan or getting the finances for like your budget for your business?
I'm glad you asked. There's a gentleman in our front row here, Chaz Fertel, that we'll have to connect you with. He does a number of things for training people that are starting out in businesses. My son, who's in the room, went through the program, and my daughter as well. So definitely need to meet Chaz.
It's a great resource. You'll definitely love it. So as you were talking, I just couldn't help but realize you're going to need an analytical mindset, right? You're going to need to really pay attention to a lot of different aspects of things when you're investing, whether it's real estate, whether it's mutual funds, but you got to want to know the company. So ultimately, you're going to become a lifelong learner. A lifelong learner, you're going to be dealing with finances for the rest of your life. right? So I think it's important that we continue to learn in the area of our finances for the rest of our lives. So this brings me to my next point, our learners. We can't leave our students out of the equation. Now, we talked about a lot of things that, that we can do, but let's talk about our students for a moment, our college students. What are some of the things that you suggest, or any stories that you have about college students who use their talents, or they use their creative ways to build wealth?
Any college students in the room? Yep, not a whole lot. All right, you don't have to be in college to apply this. My friend Donnell buys textbooks. So she keeps on top of what books are still relevant. And you gotta do your research. You can't just buy any random textbook. But she knows ones that are still being used. They may be a year, 2 years, 3 years old, but they're still being used in curriculum. She'll go to bookstores, garage sales, Facebook Marketplace. She'll buy people's old textbooks and then sell them to current students via any of the online platforms that are going to use those same textbooks again. Big markup because these books oftentimes go for next to nothing. Sort of big risk too, because you don't know that the next professor is going to utilize that book. So just be careful. You might wind up in that hoarder status of a lot of books in your house if you jump into that without being really aware of the classes and programs of both your local and nationally. If you're going to be selling this online, just be aware that textbooks get phased out. There's edition 3, edition 4, edition 5, and maybe edition 4 is still applicable, but it lost half the value. That still is good if you're buying it at 5 cents on the dollar, right? So being aware of your industry and learning as much as you can about your side gig. She kind of stayed in that scene from college until she's my age. So she kind of stayed in that scene, and that helped her kind of keep a finger on the pulse.
If I'm not mistaken, when I was in college, I used to buy my books off Amazon. I think Amazon started, they were mainly like textbooks. I'm a little embarrassed to say, you guys, I do have a tub full of textbooks when I was in college, because I'm like, I bought this book for $350. I am going to sell this book. Never really got around to doing it, but I had good intentions. I was a college student. It was a long time ago.
Everybody thinks they're going to reuse their textbooks. Nobody does. They stack away. Yeah, sell those puppies as fast as you can while they still have value.
Yeah, anybody wants to buy an accounting book? It's only 5 cents.
It's only 5 editions old.
We have a question online.
Yes.
Deborah Perry, if you want to unmute.
There you go.
Oh, hi, everyone.
Deborah.
I had a question and I put it in the chat and now I'm trying to find it, but it was about, there was one question had to do with credit card applications. No, I'm sorry. Go to another person and then I'll come back in because I want to find my specific question. I put it in the chat. Okay.
What did you put?
Yeah, I can read it. She's seen offers pop up online for applications for credit cards that supposedly improve your credit score by getting their card. Is that a scam or is it possible?
So,
Thank you.
yeah, so all legitimate credit cards report to the same agencies. So unless there is a product that I've never heard of, and I don't understand how that could even work because they are all reporting to the same credit agencies. If you pay your bill, if you have a credit card, and you pay your bills, it will help your credit. If you max out your credit cards, it will hurt your credit. Doesn't matter what card you have. So they want to see a small balance on it, and they want to see it paid off every month. If somebody's marketing as this is a good intro one, it's possible that they have a lower criteria to get it. So they may be marketing to people that don't have credit, and they may give them a shot at applying and being approved that other cards would not. But I would sooner look for, is there fees that they're not telling you about? Are they just trying to take advantage of you? I wouldn't get a credit card that has a fee unless you are using it for tens of thousands of dollars a year for like a business. Otherwise, you don't need one that has a fee. It's not going to pay back. So I would probably ignore ones that are doing kind of gimmicky schemes like that and just look for the facts. Is there no annual fees? Do they have a decent cash back? The interest rate of your credit card shouldn't matter because remember, you're not going to use it unless you can pay it off every month.
Got it. Okay, that's the key, paying it off every month.
Every month or don't use it.
Okay,
No,
Okay.
yeah, I just wanted to, second to that, when you had mentioned, things are gimmicky. We all know credit cards are tricky, right? They want you to sign up.
yeah, I know.
And
Lots of,
ultimately, your credit score is only going to be based off of your actions and your finances. So it was just kind of funny because as I was listening and I was like, that's a marketing tactic to get you to get a credit card. So when it comes to the credit cards, go back to that same point, read the fine print, read everything. And just know that there's nothing that someone else can do to build your score for you. Even when it comes to the credit boost things, they may do a little something, but ultimately the biggest changes that you're going to see in your finances is you having better habits, paying attention to that fine print and making better decisions.
And waiting for that second marshmallow.
Yes. Letting them pile up, build a snowman.
Isn't that sort of a catch-22 that, people want to raise their credit score, but in the end, the things they do to do that actually cause them to be more deeper in the hole. For example, my credit score is probably not very good because I don't have any debt. So they see me as probably a person that, is not good. But in
Basically,
reality, it doesn't matter what my credit score is, at least to me.
Yeah, so depending on what you're doing, credit may be very critical, or it may not be even relevant. It may not matter to you. So if you already own your home, you're not starting a business, not planning on borrowing for a car, maybe it doesn't even matter. But for someone that is fiscally responsible and is going to buy a home, is going to on debt, is going to maybe grow a business with some form of debt, then credit is very critical. Kind of takes some self-analysis and like, where do I want to go? It goes back to those goals, right? If we don't have goals, then how do we know if we're on track to achieve it? We're just kind of getting in the car and just driving. How do you know if you've arrived to your location if you don't even know where your location is, right? So setting some goals and working backwards. If you have a goal in 5 years to buy a house, then you need to be setting aside money for a down payment and you need to be building your credit, right? If you bought your dream house 10 years ago and you're ready to retire and you have no intention of utilizing debt, then maybe it doesn't matter so much, right?
so yeah, she's definitely individualized. Yes.
You have a question online, Jamila?
Yes, Jamila, you have a question for us?
She's unmuted and ready.
Okay. Can you hear us? It's on.
Okay, we'll come back to her. She didn't put it in the chat, so I can't read it.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you talk about savings accounts, right? Like you have your emergency fund and your 3 months. Should you hold those in two separate accounts or should you just have everything in one single account? Or play them out in two different banks?
I think that depends upon that person. Now, there are some people who can keep it all in one account, right? But it also depends upon what you're using those, how you're utilizing those funds. You have the 3 to 6 months. That's great. You have that, sitting over here. You also have your emergency. Let's say that your emergency savings is just 10,000. Some people will feel comfortable with it being separated into different places. Maybe you have different annual percentages that you're getting for in different places. But there's nothing, in my personal opinion, I don't think that there's anything negative with keeping it together. That way you're getting more bang for your buck when it comes to the interest rate that you're earning on those funds. But for some people, it's a mind thing, and you may have to keep them separated. Right? But if you can keep them together, that's great, keep them together, but know how much money is dedicated to the emergency savings and how much is dedicated to my 3 to 6 month savings. One of the things that I often talk about in basic money management is having money rules, having a money law for yourself. Like we have laws, right, for the government. They set laws for us to keep things in order, to help us to be, successful in certain areas, things like that. Well, have money laws for your finances. Have some rules set for your emergency savings. Under what conditions am I allowed to use this? Right? Under what conditions am I absolutely not using this? And live by those rules. And you'll begin to see your savings build over time because you're not dipping back into it because you're abiding by your own law.
So with a lot of the ingenious ideas that you came up with, do you guys talk on the tax advantages to some of these things, like for your friend that did the drill? There's cars being utilized and so could they possibly claim the depreciation of it and stuff like that. Do you guys have a resource that is to that? And also how to set up, if you're gonna invest in homes, for instance, how to set things up or decide on what to buy based off of how much of a profit margin you might have and stuff like that.
Those are good questions. So the first part with taxes, you're going to want to consult with your individual tax accountant or CPA. I am neither. I consult with my tax accountant and CPA for those decisions. For the second, I like your thinking. It's strategic, right? You're where can I do not just to make money, but also to minimize my tax loss? That is awesome thinking, and there are resources. I don't particularly guide people in that. A lot of that will also be driven by your CPA. Some CPAs just do taxes. Some will give you like guidance along those ways. Finding the right one is key. I have not necessarily found that perfect one either, because as my needs change, I think I've outgrown the one that I utilize. And so that's a constant thing. Like, you may have found a great one and then you outgrow it. And you keep looking, kind of like a bank. One size doesn't fit all. Just because you've been banking with one, you're not a tree, right? You weren't planted there. You can just get up and move. You can pick another one. And I think that was probably something that throughout your growth of your business, you're going to have to always be cognizant of. Is this person serving me well? Do they understand what I'm doing? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that did. I was kind of looking for a resource. Some ideas on how to pick a good resource.
I don't have those. Do you?
Unfortunately, I don't. It
We can
sounds
share
like
an
it's more
account,
so a
but
tax
just
account.
Do sign it back here for a one-on-one. We'll share
Okay.
some account contacts for you.
We have another
We
question.
have another question.
Yeah, and then like repeat the question so that the online folks can hear it, because they can't hear the other people. So the question was, what are your thoughts associated with brokerage accounts?
The question is, what are your thoughts associated with brokerage accounts? You want to start off?
Sure. Depending on where you're at in your journey of investing, if you just got started, it's probably fine. If you look at the statistics, I'm a huge fan of numbers and charts. If you look at statistically, a lot of financial advisors will tell you like they will make a better return than a self-guided investor will. And you can kind of look at the charts that they'll show you. Statistics can kind of be manipulated in that manner. They also have fees associated. So depending on your risk tolerance and where you're at in life and where they're putting your money and where you would put your money, those charts don't always look like that. So if you have a lower risk tolerance, you probably are better off self-managing just using index funds, because the cost to manage is almost nothing. Your advisor that is doing those moves for you, they'll charge you at least 1%, and that 1% is compounding. Every time they move your money, it's costing you. And so you're losing some of that compound growth. So it there isn't one answer. Depending on where you're at, if you have no knowledge and no intention of learning, being curious about the market, you may be better off just putting it in with an advisor. But if you have some level of curiosity and you want to learn, and you start with safe ones like index funds, I think you're well served to at least do some of it yourself.
If you don't mind me sharing another possible idea for, knew a young man who's helps, there again, we help people start businesses. So if anybody's interested in that, go sign up in the back and talk to you more in our Young Entrepreneurs Academy class. But I had a young man that while he was in college for his 4-year period of time, he would go around and put flyers under all the dorm doors. And this doesn't have to be necessarily a student even today. It would be a student today. You could do this and not be a student. But what he did is he put notes under doors and said, you know, because students are notorious when they leave college of just throwing things away. And you got little refrigerators, you've got books, you've got other things that are very valuable. And this young man would make thousands of dollars by helping and saying he'd help take those things and dispose of them so that they're just leaving. They're not worrying about cleaning out their room and disposing of it. And he'd make $1,000 and then he would keep those little refrigerators. And when the students would move in the next time, he'd be out there in a pickup truck with refrigerators, and those students would be coming out there and buying those refrigerators from him. So he was charging people to clean up their waste and then selling the products that were on the other side. He made money on both sides. So another point, who in here buys new cars? Not many people buy new cars. All right, well, there's a good tip for that. If you buy, and in Florida, it's a little different. If you buy a new car in the state of Ohio and you pay tax, state tax on that new car, and after 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, whatever, and you sell that car and buy another new one, you don't pay tax again. So if you paid, let's say, $5,000 tax on a new car, 3 to 5 years down the road, when you sell that car in Ohio, buy a new car in Ohio, you can apply $5,000 to the next car. In Florida, you can do that with used cars also. Little tip.
I did not know that.
Yes. We pay multiple times if you buy multiple times. Look into getting a tax refund if it hadn't been long.
So, lastly, I think we're gonna just kind of summarize some of the common threads here. You'll notice a lot of people turn hobbies into incomes, right? The kind of cool thing about that is it's doing something you already enjoy anyway, so your side hustle isn't like working 2 jobs, right? If you can find a way to make money with your hobby, one, you're already sort of an expert in that, right? You have a competitive advantage because you already have knowledge in that field. So if you can stop and think about the hobbies that you have, how can I make money in this? I already know the product, the needs, the clientele. I already know something more than the average Joe does about this. And I spent money on it, so that means other people are spending money on it. How can I somehow arrange this to where instead of spending money, I can make money? How can I turn a liability to an asset? Remember, liabilities take money out of your pockets, assets put money into your pockets. So I jokingly say, only half jokingly, I don't really enjoy a hobby until I've made money on it. And if you ask my wife, she'll usually get like the update of like, okay, this hobby is now in the positive this much. And I exponentially enjoy it more than I fly paramotors. And paramotor is basically an engine on my back with a propeller. I set up a parasail, soft wing on a grass field, start walking and give it some gas and it'll fly off in the sky. And most people are like, that's an expensive hobby. These things cost like $12,000, $13,000 new for a wing and the engine. The engines are all made in Italy and they're like high power, lightweight, it's on your back. And this is your landing gear, so you can only put so much weight on it. But I bought multiple setups used from people, split them up because again, I already knew the equipment. I already knew what was high demand, what people liked, what people didn't like, stayed away from the brands people didn't like. And split it up. I sold the wings separate, sold the engine separate, sold the frame separate, the reserve parachute separate, the strobe flashlight separate. the helmet that came with it separate, just split it all up, double my money, triple my money. And I think I'm like $10,000 ahead, and I have multiple rigs that I fly for different weather and different scenarios. So try to think of your hobbies and your skill set when you're looking for a side gig to be able to make money. What do I have a unique competitive advantage, right? And that kind of brings me to the next idea of like an idea is great. The world is full of great ideas. What it's not so full of is the will to take the next necessary steps to action to make something of it, right? Take imperfect action, make a business plan, make goals, work backwards from those goals. What do I have to do to make it happen? It's not a goal, it's a dream if you don't actually have steps to do it. So, for example, if I wanted to do something by next year, I would stop and say, hey, to make that happen, monthly, I would have to be able to do this. And to be able to make that happen, I would have to start next week by meeting with these people and setting up this account, like work backwards, right? Start whatever your goal is, work backwards from there into logical steps. You've taken anything from today. Every one of you guys has some potential to make money with money and to grow your wealth and have a better financial future. Take imperfect action, but don't just take the information you learn and say that was a great idea and move on and forget about it. Because that won't, it make you feel better, but it won't actually make anything of it. So, Kayla, you have anything to add?
I think that was some great information. Thank you, Josh. Something else for me to add?
Any questions?
That was a great interview.
Any other questions? No?
They're good. They say thank you. Great
All
information.
right.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys for coming in.
Thank you, Josh and Kayla, for that. That was amazing. And
There is one last question.
Oh.
I meant to ask a question,
Yeah.
but maybe I can ask you.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I'm starting as a teacher, and I have to pick my retirement investing. So there's the choice between a combined plan and defined contribution combined, and then the regular old they do everything. So I'm not so sure which route to go. They said go aggressive, go for the defined combined. But I have no.
You are young. Time is on your side. Are you willing and curious to learn?
Yes.
Then go the more aggressive route. Because you can afford to make a mistake or two now and still recover if you're young. You will do better statistically if, as long as you take an interest and you learn, you'll outpace the other option.
You have any, like, you said dummies work free?
Stock Market for Dummies is great. Investopedia is a free resource that any terms you don't understand, you can just go over there and learn. It's fantastic. You can talk like a financial guru in no time, using words that everybody else won't understand.
Thank you.
And one other thing I failed to mention, there is a QR code on a piece of paper somewhere that will give you a financial assessment to kind of go over some of the same things I talked about today for next steps and kind of assess where you're at. I want to thank Jeff for fixing that for me. So I am not the tech guy. In fact, I'm like the last guy that should ever be handling tech. And as of yesterday, it didn't work. I was locked out of it. And Jeff spent his time yesterday going through 90-something pages of this assessment and finding the error, fixing it. So thank you, Jeff. I really do appreciate that. And if you want next steps for kind of going over a lot of, even some of the same concepts we talked about today, just scan that QR code and it'll get you through that.
Right, thanks. So just a few announcements. We hear the word business plan thrown out kind of throughout this morning, and Noble has a couple of really great opportunities for those who want to maybe take a business idea and have us help you flesh it out. Chaz and I do one-on-ones, and I love doing these one-on-ones. It's just time. The minimum we spend is about an hour, and we've gone 2 hours or more just talking through your idea and how to strategize and how to kind of take some next steps. So we have signups at the back table if you want to sign up for the one-on-ones. Also, I want to reintroduce you to the Noble Academy that's coming up in April. Again, this will help you walk through the step-by-step process for creating a business plan. I love this class too. I've been a part of helping Chaz do that for years now. And it's really fun to watch these people with an idea and formulate their business plan and even pitch at the end and get investors to give you real money that you can spend to help get your business off the ground. So we have one starting in April. If you want more information, please scan the QR code for that. So please sign up if you're kind of at that stage of wanting to take your idea and kind of formulate it a little bit more. Another thing that we just launched, which we're excited to announce, is a lot of you have been asking about how do we donate to Noble to help the cause, to help us kind of achieve the purpose and vision for Noble. Well, we now have a feature on our website that you can go and actually donate now to Noble. So if you just go to the website, you'll see a donate tab on the top and the donate banner on the side if you're interested in just helping us out to carry on the mission and vision. All this stuff we do is for free because we want to serve you guys. We love serving you guys, and this is a great way for you guys to give back. Couple other announcements and then let you guys go. Just some upcoming events. Next week, we have an online forum. This guy, Jeff Elder, is going to be leading the next one. So I'm going to be talking about the spiritual DNA of the kingdom. And talk about some of those spiritual disciplines that we should own as kingdompreneurs. Then Doug will be doing the end of month forum called the Continuous Improvement Mindset, which I'm really looking forward to. Then we have a live in-person event on the 23rd with JD Orr, titled Co-Create with God in Developing Your Craft. So really excited about that one. So look to the website for these upcoming events, look to the sheet, make sure you check out the academy, and don't forget to sign up for a one-on-one. Thank you so much for being with us today. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.